Sometimes you need a quick project, and what's quicker than ghosts? I painted this entire unit of Army of the Dead across a single day. But quick doesn't have to mean boring. In this video, I'm going to share some simple ways to take your ghosts to the next level at no effort and with just a handful of paints. Let's get started. The Army of the Dead are a really cool, almost luminous green, and I want to replicate that, but I'm actually not starting with green. I've base coated my model with grey Seer for a cool white, and then I'm actually going to start with some undershading that I tint green. So over my grey Seer, I apply a good layer of Apothecary White contrast. This will provide shading and depth that I can exploit in the next steps. You can be quite heavy-handed here, we're not looking to be neat, and you can also apply a second layer if you want the shading to be even stronger. And to be honest, if you're in a real rush, that's already a pretty effective ghostly effect. If your models have shields, don't forget to paint them in the same way. Once that's dry, our pre-shading is done and we can now turn green. And for that, I need these three in particular. I'm going to need them all at the same time, so I put a big dollop of all three on my palette. I start by coating all over the model with Plaguebearer Flesh contrast. This is quite thin compared to some other contrast colours, which is why I wanted to pre-shade the model, because you can see it's leaving all of that shading and basically tinting it green. Now we have a ghostly green, but all of that previous shading remains. Now you can of course leave it there, but if you want to add a bit more interest, you can play with mixing in some other paints whilst the contrast is still wet. The thicker a layer of Plaguebearer Flesh, the more time you'll have to do so. First, with Creed Camo, I layer over the bottom of any robes and cloth to darken them. And then use a clean brush to then feather the transition between the two colours together for a smooth gradient. I also apply this to alternating sections of any weapon blades to begin creating a TMM style effect. Then, with Mantis Warriors Green, I patchily apply this over other areas, adding some almost radioactive brightness to upper areas. This can be a bit splotchy because I want this to start creating an almost ethereal effect where light is shining randomly through the model. You can also see this on the shield, how I cover the lower half with Creed Camo, and then blend the colours where they meet, apply Mantis Warriors Green on the upper portions, and for a bit more depth, I even apply Wyldwood contrast to the very bottom, again blending it into the Creed Camo whilst both are still wet. And with that done, you can see how that's added some immediate visual interest, taking advantage of the contrast paint properties to blend the colours together. Again, you can happily leave the model here at this point and it will look great on the tabletop, but I'm next going to show you some optional final touches to really make the model stand out. First, I dry brush everything lightly with Dorn Yellow to bring all the green tones together and pick out the raised areas. If you want to push the highlights further, you can take a fine brush and emphasise the Dorn Yellow highlights further on particular areas, like the faces, edges of any armour or the weapon blades. This is entirely optional, but will really make the models pop further. That highlighting makes such a difference, but if you feel like it's taken away some of the gradient, you can apply some Athonian Camoshade over the bottom areas where you painted Creed Camo, which will just tint and emphasise them a little more. You can also use this to emphasise any deeper folds in the cloth. Finally, some models have chainmail. Just for visual interest, I paint these areas with Warplock Bronze for a rusty old iron. Of course being very careful not to get this over what you've just painted. And then dry brush lightly with Stormhost Silver, concentrating on lower areas to add some shine. And finally, I paint any beards with Iyanden Yellow. And there we are, a complete Warrior of the Dead. All that's left is to baste a model, and you're done. And just like that, with maybe 10 steps and even fewer paints, you have a whole unit. These same techniques are usable on any ghostly models. They'd look great for Nighthaunt or Vampire counts, for example. All that remains now is to thank my members. Your support really means so much. Please do consider becoming a member yourself if you enjoyed this video, and like and subscribe to be notified when my next tutorial drops, or suggest what you'd like to see me paint next. I'll see you next time, and until then, happy painting.